Hello, this is Algebra 2. Welcome. This is 4-5 quadratic equations. Essential question is, how do you solve quadratic equations? Let's begin. So, you know how to factor quadratic expressions from the last section. Quadratic equations, it's just basically a little extra step. So we have to use factoring to solve the quadratic equations. So what happens is x squared plus 9x plus 20 equals 0, and then you factor that to x plus 4 and x plus 5, and you get your two solutions of -4 and -5. But how do you do that? Well, we have this thing called the zero product property, and that says if you multiply two things, a and b, and they equal 0, then either a equals 0 or b equals 0. So what we do is we say that each factor, we got to solve it for 0, and those are our two solutions. So whatever value for x will make that factor 0, that is one of the solutions. So let's show you how this works. So I solved that. So here's the steps here. So the first step, if I want to solve this and factor it, I want to make sure it's set to 0, and in this case it is equal to 0. When I say set to equal 0, that's this part right here. And it is, so that checks off. The second step is factoring that quadratic. And I did it over here with this box. So, and I think we did this in the last video as well. So it factored to x plus 4 times x plus 5 equals 0. So that's done. Now, this is the new step. You set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So splitting them up into two different factors here, we have x plus 5 equals 0 and x plus 4 equals 0. I will subtract 5 on each side on this side, and these will cancel and get x equals -5. So that's one solution. And over here, I subtract 4 on each side, and I'm going to get x equals -4, and that's another solution. So my final solutions are x equals -5 and -4. So two solutions for x, and that's what you're going to get with these kind of equations. All right, let's try some examples. So pause the video. 2, 1. All right, so I'm going to set out my box over here. So I'm going to put x squared on this left side and +6 over here. I need two numbers that multiply to 6 and add to -5. That's going to be -2 and -3, because -2 times -3 equals +6, and -2 plus -3 equals -5. So I'm going to write this as -2x and -3x. If I want to factor those, factoring up this way, it factors to +3. Factor up this way, it's going to factor to x. On this side, it's going to be x, and over here, it will have to be actually, I messed up here. So here's the thing with the factoring. These are actually going to be -3 and +3. So -3 and -6. So that's -3x. Whatever sign this is, that's what it's going to be. So -3. Whatever sign this is, it's going to be -2. So there's my factors. It's going to be x minus 3 times x minus 2 equals 0. So then I have to solve for each of these factors. So I'm going to set this one x minus 3 equal to 0 and x minus 2 equal to 0. Well, solving each of these, I add 3 to each side, and I'm going to get x equals 3. And over here, add 2 to each side. I'm going to get x equals 2. So my two solutions are x equals 2 and 3. Two answers. All right, next one. Pause the video. Okay, so your first step is to see, is it set to equal 0? In this case, it's not. So I need to make it equal 0, and the way I'm going to do that is get rid of this -12 by adding 12 to both sides. So you have to add 12 to both sides. And when you do that, these 12s will cancel. I get equals 0 over here, and then I'm going to write this as x squared minus 7x plus 12. There, now we're set. Now I can factor those. So I'm going to do my box again, x squared, and it's going to be 12 right here. So two numbers, they're going to have to multiply to 12 and add to -7. Those are going to be -3 and -4. So it's going to be -3x and -4x. When I factor that, this is going to factor, since that's a negative, it'll be -4. And over here, it's going to factor as an x. Out here, it's going to factor as an x. And out here, this will factor to -3. So my factored form is x minus 4 times x minus 3 equals 0. And solving for each of these, x minus 4 equals 0 and x minus 3 equals 0. I'm going to add 4 to both sides here. And you're going to get x equals 4. Add 3 to both sides here. I'm going to get x equals 3. So my final answers are x equals 3 and 4. Just like that. Last one. Pause the video. 2, 1. Okay, so it's already set to equal 0, so now I have to factor this quadratic expression on the left. So it'll be 2x squared and negative 15. And I need two numbers that add up to 7 and multiply to negative 15. So, got to start trying out. Well, it's not that because we have a coefficient right here, right? So they have to multiply to a times c, which is going to be 2 times negative 15. So that's going to be negative 30. Forgot that 2's right here. And then they're going to have to add, so they have to multiply to negative 30, and they're going to have to add to 7. What are two numbers that do that? In this case, it's going to be negative 3 and positive 10. Because, let's see, it's going to be negative 3 times 10, that's going to equal negative 30. And it's going to be negative 3 plus 10, that equals positive 7. So my factors are negative 3x and positive 10x. So what's going on here with the boxes? I can factor out a positive 5 and factor this way. I can factor out an x. This way I can factor out a 2x. And this way I'm factoring out a negative 3. So my factored form is going to be 2x minus 3 times x plus 5 equals 0. Solving for each of those, I'm going to get 2x minus 3 equals 0 and x plus 5 equals 0. On the left-hand side here, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. It's going to cancel out those. I get 2x equals 3. Then you divide by 2, and I get x equals 3 halves. On the right-hand side, subtract by 5 on each side, and I'm going to get x equals negative 5. So those are my two solutions. So I say x equals negative 5 and 3 halves. That's it. Done.